Zhang Yi then took a seat on his bed, sighing lightly. Why do I have more and more questions the more I think about them? He thought to himself. And as Zhang Yi was lost in thought, there was a knock on his door seconds after. Yang Xinxin's voice came from the other end of the room, outside the door. Brother Zhang Yi, can I come in? Zhang Yi replied that she could. And immediately as Yang Xinxin entered the room, she told Zhang Yi that she'd thought of something and wanted to talk to him. But Zhang Yi spared no time and handed her his notes he'd just written. He told Yang Xinxin to take a look at it first before anything else. So as she took a look, at first glance, she asked Zhang Yi what it was. And this is? She asked. I deduced this by comparing Li Jian's words with the problem with the blood vine, and it should be 9 out of 10 times correct. After a thorough reading, she asked Zhang Yi what his plans were. I have some ideas now. Can you listen to them and see if there are any problems? Hearing this, Yang Xinxin was on board and agreed to offer any insight she has that could be of help. Meanwhile, as the scene shifts to the camp of the Snow Worship sect, and after the departure of all the other remaining forces, the followers of the Snow Worship sect, who were less than 1,000, began to rebuild their homes. The survivors were basically the church's top leaders and their families, and some ordinary believers who were lucky enough not to be swallowed up by the zombie tide. They lost most of their relatives and friends and were extremely sad. But these survivors, no matter how desperate and sad they were, they had to continue to live. So, under the command of the priests, everyone began to clean up the battlefield and move the corpses to the building where the blood vines were. In addition, they collected the remaining supplies to prepare for a new life. With fewer people alive, the shortage of supplies was no longer a problem, which is the only good news for them. The high priest, Zhang Yi, calmly directed everyone to rearrange their homes in an orderly manner. It was nothing more than gathering tents, sleeping bags and other supplies and changing to a house that could shelter from the wind and snow. After simply arranging some tasks, he walked into the church to discuss the next action plan with Yuan. Yuan stood in front of the altar as usual and prayed to the statue of Jesus. Zhang Yi closed the door, close the distance between them, and stood 3 meters behind Yuan. Everything went smoothly, didn't it? A faint smile appeared on his lips. Now, no one in Tianhai City can stop us, and no one will suspect us. After all, the tens of thousands of believers who died are enough to dispel their suspicion and arouse their pity. As of now, all that's left is to just quietly wait for the investigation team to leave. Yuan slowly opened her eyes, and her clear eyes were like the frozen surface of the East China Sea. But now, there is still one thing I am worried about. Zhang Yi frowned slightly when he heard this. Oh? Is there anything else you're worried about? Our arrangements were perfect. There were no omissions from the beginning to the end. Even the blood vines have been perfectly handled by us. Yuan turned around and looked at Zhang Yi quietly. That night, someone saw me using other people's supernatural powers. A sharp cold light flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes. You mean, the woman Zhang Yi brought here? At that time, everyone in the church except Zhou was from the sect. The people of the Snow Worship sect were restrained and could not tell outsiders any news about Yuan. But Zhou was not a member of the sect. So, seeing Yuan use superpowers that were unrelated to her abilities might undoubtedly expose her secrets. This is a problem I have been worried about. I don't know if it will become a hidden danger. Yuan said this with her eyes lowered. Zhang Yi thought about it and suddenly smiled. Don't worry, it will be fine. Even if you use other superpowers openly for the first time, so what? There are so many different types of people in this world. Who can say that one person is not allowed to have multiple abilities at the same time? We, as people of the Snow Worship sect, had suffered the most casualties in this battle. It is impossible for anyone to suspect us. And even if they have doubts, so what? At most, they will discover the secret of the Ice Soul. And most importantly, the Jiangnan district will not care about that kind of thing. As for the other families, Zhang Yi couldn't help but laugh at the expense of the other forces. His face was full of arrogance. If they know the secret of the Ice Soul, it will be useless and probably too late. Yuan nodded. That's true. In the face of absolute strength, everything else becomes irrelevant. In today's world, only the law of the jungle remains. Then, once the investigation team leaves, we should also take action. Yuan raised her snow-white arms, her eyes showing piety. The most delicious food must be saved for the last. It must be savored, so as to enjoy the taste with every second it lasts. As long as I can obtain the abilities of the leaders of each family, my power will reach an unimaginable height. I will become the god of this new world. The scene shifts back to the shelter in Zhang Yi's room. At this moment, he and Yang Xinxin had talked for a long time. Zhang Yi had a plan of action in his mind, and the details were filled in by Yang Xinxin. If we start looking for those hidden zombies tomorrow, and use the existence of the zombies to confirm your guess, then the Jiangnan region might be more concerned. We have to complete the search for the zombie group without telling anyone else about these speculations. Zhang Yi said this to Yang Xinxin. You see, the plan these two had formulated was certainly cruel. But for their lives, they must do it. Yang Xinxin agreed. It is true that we cannot let the others know about this for the time being, otherwise it will cause unnecessary panic. Anyway, the specific execution level only requires the two of us to know. But in this case, Yang Xinxin blinked curiously with concern. Are you going to do this alone? Zhang Yi smiled. He got up from his bed, and a hint of warmth appeared in his eyes. At this point, I am the only one who can do this. The concept of the level of mutants was now becoming clearer, and the difference in abilities at different levels were also very huge. The opponent they were about to face was very likely to have reached the highest level of human mutation at present. An Epsilon mutant. It was also not possible to win by numbers, so they must use all the means they have. And some necessary means they can also exploit. Yang Xinxin told Zhang Yi that if he needed anything, he shouldn't hesitate to contact her at any time. After all, she was his only help at this point, because Zhang Yi didn't want to worry the rest at this initial stage of the plan. Fortunately, they all trusted Zhang Yi very much. They would obey whatever Zhang Yi asked them to do at critical moments. And that was enough. The next day, the shelter was still a peaceful scene. Everyone believed that the zombie crisis was over, and that Tianhai City would no longer be in danger in the future. Therefore, everyone's face was filled with smiles. Everyone was happily chatting about tomorrow and the future, and even imagined that after a while, they could go to the East China Sea together. Take a look at the vast ocean, go fishing or something. Or one day, go to Morning Dew Base to discuss whether they could go on a sea trip. Zhang Yi listened with a smile, and occasionally expressed his own opinions. It was as if his worries didn't exist at all. After breakfast, Zhang Yi got up and headed for the shelter's exit door. Seeing this, the others curiously asked him what he was going to do. What are you going out for? Do you want us to accompany you? Uncle Yu asked. Zhang Yi shrugged. Then he turned to face them with a smile. Although the Corpse King has been cleaned up, there must be scattered zombies nearby. I will go over to clean it up and practice the swordsmanship that Liang Yu taught me. Liang Yu stood up after hearing this. Then I'll accompany you and give you some guidance. You shouldn't do this kind of thing alone. Cleaning up the remaining zombies should be the responsibility of all of us. Uncle Yu and Chunlei also spoke up, expressing their desire to go with Zhang Yi. Count us in. We can't just let the two of you go to clean up the zombies. We are here to help as well. Zhang Yi thought about it and responded with a smile. That is not necessary. It's not like we are dealing with a corpse king and its bronze-armored corpses. It's not convenient for us to make such a big fuss. He sighed heavily when he saw how determined they were. How about this? Let's split up and act around the shelter. With this, each person can clean up an area. When the three of them heard this, they felt that what Zhang Yi said made sense, so they agreed to his proposal. Zhang Yi told them to go get their weapons and change into their combat uniforms first. Then they can go hunting. But as Zhang Yi was about to open the door, Flower, who was following closely behind him, suddenly leaped onto his shoulder, expressing his intention to join him. Outside, Zhang Yi had his combat uniform on and was preparing to leave shortly after. He chose the direction of Tsitsu Station, said goodbye, then drove off. Zhang Yi only brought his most trusted pet and bodyguard, Flower. But the reason for bringing Flower was not because he needed him as a bodyguard, but for something much more important. After developing and enhancing his double doors, Zhang Yi's ability to protect his life had reached a peak, and as long as he wants to run, with the continuous displacement of his double doors, no one in the world could catch him. The reason why he needed Flower was his sense of smell as a beast. Zhang Yi brought Flower to the entrance of an underground station at Tianfeng District. At this time, the entire subway tunnel was frozen by a hard layer of ice. Zhang Yi puts his vehicle back into his alternate space and took out his satellite phone. It had the map of the entire subway line of Tianhai City, and he was currently in the area where the camp of the Snow Worship Sect was located, which was more than 10 kilometers away. The subway map of Tianhai City was very large and was crisscrossing with a total thread of more than 800 kilometers. It would take an extremely long time if he was going to walk through the tunnel with 2 legs. Zhang Yi then said to Flower, "Let's go and find them." Then, the two head down the subway entrance. This time, Zhang Yi came to the underground station in Tianfeng District to find the corpse group hidden underground. He is sure that there must be a large number of corpse groups with more fierce combat power. And those were the hidden trump cards of Yuan Kongye, which she would definitely use to completely eliminate the other forces in Tianhai City. As long as they can be found, the second step in Zhang Yi's plan can be implemented. Due to the extremely large subway space in Tianhai City, Zhang Yi guessed that they are most likely hidden in Tianfeng District, near the Snow Worship Sect. About an hour of exploring every corner of the subway tunnel in Tianfeng District, the two hadn't had any luck in locating the hidden zombies. Flower squatted on Zhang Yi's shoulder and leisurely sniffed the air. "Is there anything?" Flower just shook his head when Zhang Yi asked. This didn't make sense to Zhang Yi, because according to his analysis, there must be a large number of zombies with powerful combat capabilities in this area of the subway. Could it be that I found the wrong location? He then decided to look elsewhere. Of course, in actuality, Zhang Yi also secretly hopes that everything he'd thought so far was just his excessive delusion. In fact, deep down, he hopes that there was no such thing as a swarm of zombies, and there was no conspiracy. But before he comes to that conclusion, he must investigate the entire subway tunnel in Tianfeng District thoroughly. So, with that determination, he opened his double doors and confidently walked through. Fortunately for him, his search eventually paid off because where he arrived immediately after made him halt in his tracks. Just when he came to the most remote and desolate area on the northeastern edge of Tianhai City, Flower finally showed an unusual reaction. It was just the subway line that had just arrived here. Flower's hair stood up, his eyes fixed on the dark tunnel ahead, and he issued a low and long warning sound. Although a bit disappointed that he was right, Zhang Yi also felt relieved, and his expression was serious. "So it's hidden here?" he said. He checked his satellite phone, and it turns out that he wasn't in Tianfeng District anymore, but currently in Aoshan District, one of the most remote areas in Tianhai City, and it can be said to be the junction of the urban and the rural areas. There are almost no resources here, so there is no force occupying this place. Yuan hid the group of zombies here, which is very cunning. Zhang Yi had dealt with a similar situation before, when he first came to the underground Sitsu substation with his team, so he was very familiar with this kind of breath. The situation was so frightening and ominous, so it was obvious at this point that there are a lot of zombies ahead. Zhang Yi's eyes were full of vigilance. Although he has the ability to travel through space, he cannot 100% guarantee that he and Flower would not be in danger if they proceed any further. And there are 2 points he'd considered at this moment. First, he does not want to alarm such a large number of zombies in advance to avoid triggering a zombie riot. Second, there are intelligent creatures such as zombie kings among the zombies. If it finds that its existence is exposed, it will definitely pass this information to Yuan one way or another. And if that happens, Yuan and his team may launch an attack in advance and destroy the other major forces in Tianhai City. Zhang Yi opened his alternate space and took out a big gray rat from it. Its body size is about the same as Flower, and there is a faint strange red light flashing in its eyes. However, it is not a real giant rat. It is a mechanical rat that Zhang Yi asked Lu Karen to help build. In order not to be discovered, Zhang Yi smeared the flesh and blood of the giant rat on its body many times to ensure that there was no problem with its smell. Then Zhang Yi placed it deep in the tunnel, and he quickly retreated to a certain distance with Flower. Then, Zhang Yi took out the satellite phone and controlled it to go deep into the subway ahead through the set program. This giant rat was created by Lu Karen, and it was vivid. If you didn't look carefully, you wouldn't know it was a mechanical rat. This giant rat can even imitate the sounds of rats and communicate simply. The mechanical rat quickly traveled through the underground tunnel. The subway line in Aoshan District is very large, and it will take a while to investigate it. Zhang Yi was not in a hurry. He was very patient in this matter. And everything in the subway was transmitted to the satellite phone with the perspective of the mechanical mouse. Zhang Yi and Flower waited for another 2 hours and finally found the picture they wanted to see. In the deepest part of the subway tunnel in Aoshan District, there are indeed a very terrifying number of zombies sleeping there, layered and blocking many railway tunnels. Zhang Yi's preliminary estimate of the number was also 300,000 or more. That's right, the lower limit is 300,000, and the upper limit is immeasurable. Because going forward, the mechanical mouse can no longer get through. The number of deaths in Tianhai City was close to 20 million, which are excellent materials for making zombies. As long as they are given enough time, the number of zombies will be incalculable. Zhang Yi took a deep breath, and he immediately controlled the mechanical mouse to leave the group of zombies, and then found a drain and drilled in. Finally, the mechanical mouse entered standby mode there. If necessary, it can still be used, if not, it would stay there. In short, it must not be discovered by others. Zhang Yi took Flower and quickly left the underground tunnel. After returning to the surface, Zhang Yi felt the cold wind outside, looked at the vast snowfield, and exhaled a long breath of turbid air. Although my guess has been confirmed, I can't be happy at all. The real challenge is still ahead, Zhang Yi said with narrowed eyes.